Welcome to the St. Joseph Radio Presents live program, broadcasting to you from the Rome of the West, St. Louis, Missouri. The program that for over 30 years has brought you eloquent speakers from across the globe to help explain, clarify, and evangelize the Catholic faith. Our program covers a variety of topics relating to current issues and occurrences in our daily lives. Now, with the aid of technology, we are able to bring the gospel message to the four corners of the world, where Christ himself did say, "Those who have ears ought to hear." It is our hope at St. Joseph Radio that through these programs we can help evangelize the world and change one soul at a time. Now, here is your host to introduce today's guest and topic.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to St. Joseph Radio Presents, coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. My name is Mark Serafino, and I'm joined by my co-host Michael Hayworth, and we're here today to talk to you about the dignity of women on our program, Man to Man, which will be broadcast on the first Saturday of every month. Hello, Michael.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Can we maybe get started with a prayer?
Absolutely. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. O glorious Saint Joseph, model of all who are devoted to labor, obtain for me the grace to work in the spirit of penance in expiation of my many sins, to work conscientiously by placing love of duty above my inclinations, to gratefully and joyously deem it as an honor to employ and to develop by labor the gifts I have received from God, to work methodically, peacefully, and in moderation and patience, without ever shrinking from it through weariness or difficulty to work above all, with purity of intention and unselfishness, having unceasingly before my eyes death and the account I have to render of time lost, talents unused, good not done, and vain complacency in success, so baneful to the work of God, all for Jesus, all for Mary, all to imitate thee, O Patriarch St. Joseph. This shall be my motto for life and eternity. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Thank you, Michael. So before we get into our main topic today, I thought we would just take a moment to review who we are. Man to Man is a new program that just started last month, and we are two advanced, experienced gentlemen who fathers, raised families, and we thought we would bring to the air a discussion about the issues of manhood today, issues that young fathers are facing, young single men, and frankly, even men of our age. So before we get further along in the program, Michael, maybe you could just take a moment or two and tell everyone who you are.
Absolutely. My name is Mike Hayworth. Been in the St. Louis metro area about 20 years now. Came here in the Air Force in 2003. Had been in, I finished my military obligation of 22 years and moved on to defense industry. Been married 35 years and have 3 children. My oldest is 34, going to be 35. My youngest is 21. My middle is 32. And my youngest is 23, going to be 23 in October. So just been very blessed to be in this area. When we retired, we felt that this was the area to be in, and we had learned a lot about the Catholic background here, the history here. And so we found so many good things and so many good families and fathers that really has helped our family. And plus, the priest that we have, our church has been instrumental in the success of our family. And how about you?
Well, great. Well, Michael, my wife Valerie and I have lived in the St. Louis area for nearly 30 years. We moved here from New Jersey, and we reverted here when we got to St. Louis. So it's a wonderful Catholic community, and it's legendary. It's not called the Rome of the West by accident. Right. We have 5 children, and you're a much braver man than me. I won't try to remember the ages, but we're very, very blessed with 5 children and 5 grandchildren. And God has been good to us to a degree that I kind of like to put it this way. He has been ridiculously generous to our family. So without any further ado, let's talk about today's topic. And I'd like to start by just giving a quote of Pope St. John Paul II, who said, God has assigned as a duty to every man the dignity of every woman. That's a pretty powerful assignment if you really take some time to reflect on what he is telling us.
Absolutely.
So when I first read this, the first question I was wondering is, I wonder how one would define dignity. And according to the Oxford Dictionary, dignity is the state or quality worthy of honor or respect. And I think it's really fitting from a secular perspective. It fits quite nicely
Yes.
with our obligation as men and husbands to our wives and our daughters. So one of the things we want to talk about to start is, how do husbands uphold the dignity of their wives? And as we were researching this and thinking about this, I came upon this in the Catechism of the Catholic Faith. This is paragraph 1605. It is not good that man should be alone. The woman, flesh of his flesh, his equal, his nearest in all things, is given to him by God as a helpmate. She thus represents God, from whom comes our help. Therefore, a man leaves his father and his mother, and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh.
That is powerful.
I don't know in my lifetime, until I read that quote, if I ever connected how my spouse represents God in my life, and the significant, powerful meaning behind that. And since finding that quote, which has only been recently, I find that I reflect on it an awful lot. And I wonder, Michael, if we could talk about, so how do husbands care for and uphold the dignity of our wives?
So it seems like, in my understanding of how the world like to project the relationship between man and woman, husband and wife, is there's always this equality. We're always talking about equal. I've never experienced one day in my marriage where everything was equal, because we share things, we have to do things, and there's always somebody trying to do one thing or another, and a balance to that. One of the things that I liked about this quote is that when I think of my wife as a helpmate, I've done a lot of education, spent a lot of time in school. My wife is truly smart, in a sense that more common sense, more character, helpful in every manner, to where there's points in things that I deal with in life where I would honestly say she encourages me in those moments when I think I can't do it. She helps me in those things that I think can't be done. And in those things, I wouldn't be able to do it by myself. So
true.
Having a helpmate, I think there's a lot more to it. And the way this talks about the equalness is really flesh of my flesh. I mean, think about it. The first person, Adam, Eve was created from a rib. I mean,
Yes.
that's a person of a
Yes. person.
And then you think about motherhood in itself. So when we go back to the dignity of my wife, the dignity of womanhood, I think of how much it's important that we as husbands love our wives, love them as we love God, as God, as an example to us, loves his church.
That's right. That's right. But just like the difficulty that we have as fallen men in loving God, there are difficulties in our day-to-day lives with our wives, where
Absolutely.
we could define the moment as difficult to love them. But very often I think the difficulty is born more in an imbalance. And when that imbalance shows itself on one side or another, it kind of gives the reflection of, this is a difficulty in our love. I just spoke to a young woman this morning who was telling me that they have a relatively newborn baby, and she and her husband suddenly realized that they weren't connecting. And in the moment they had that realization, of course, those things usually happen at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
They were able to literally gather themselves and say, okay, this doesn't feel right. It feels different. What is it? And it wasn't anything other than one would define it as, well, neglect. Spouse was neglecting the other. It was really an imbalance, because when they're in sync, neither one feels like, well, the baby or the children come before me. When you're in sync, it doesn't feel that way. So that's part of that balance when it goes off the rails,
Right.
that causes problems. And I think sometimes that's where we could possibly forget about the dignity of our spouse.
Right. And I always want to emphasize to folks that, especially for the newly married couples, there's going to be, you're blending two worlds. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be those moments where things seem like they are out of balance. Take the time to work through them. So many people so easily do not think of the marriage contract as binding.
Right.
And it's really important that you work through those things. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard of a divorced couple that, they move on and they find somebody that looks just like they married.
Yes.
The first time.
Yes.
And then what we talked about last time, how successful is that? Not very.
No.
There's a lot of chances that won't work out either.
3 out of 10 chance of it working.
You're just kicking the can down the road.
Right.
So,
exactly.
Realistically, when you go back to dignity, being able to treat the other and give of yourself to the other, that's what's important. Because if we think about how God has offered his son for us to help us, to save us, to redeem us because we went wrong, that's what we need to be able to do for our wives.
Absolutely.
And in that relationship, it's reciprocal.
And I was going to say, they're doing it likewise.
Absolutely.
And, the interaction between husband and wife, where the heart of the dignity for each other rests, it spills out. And, it's just a consequence of life. So we have to, as dads, help our children to really respect the dignity of their mom. Because, let's face it, if you're at work, if we're both at work during the day and our wives are home with our children, in many circumstances, mom could be a bad guy. Dad comes home, he could be the savior of the day. Mom could be the deliverer of the bad news. And if we're not cautious and not careful about that, we can literally set kind of a pattern where mom is always with a negative eye in her judgment, in her how she carries herself in her duties. And that's a really peculiar balance, too, for dads to be aware of and pay attention to.
Right. And you have to pick up on those things, because when you walk through the door, you don't know how that's going to look.
Right.
But you want to be sensitive to it enough to understand, okay, I want to change my approach on this because you know what the last time did.
Yes,
and learn from every one of those.
Exactly.
So one of the things I did want to go back to is when we talk about dignity, I wanted to make this one quote that I read from St. John Paul as well in one of his writings, and it's the unity of two. Man cannot exist alone. Man and woman are called from the beginning not only to exist side by side or together, but they're also called to exist mutually, one for the other.
Wow.
So I keep going back to what you're mentioning there. I wanted to kind of delve into that before we talk about the children. But there's so many examples and so many good experiences that our church has had that tries to teach us what it is to have these relationships. And the dignity that we provide when you talk about what we do with our wives and view of the children is important. Me and my wife had talked about this before, and I can't remember where it came from, but the greatest gift you can give your children is to love their mother.
Absolutely.
And I mean, that is powerful, because I can tell you from as a child, I'm from a divorced family, and I can tell you to this day, there's times where I will absolutely burst into tears because of that divorce.
Wow.
The importance of mom and dad being there. I'm 57 years old. I mean, and I still, and I've had, my parents and family members say, get over it. That's tough. I mean,
yes.
I've seen a lot of things, but I don't think that's one of the things you just get over. God didn't design it to be broken.
Right.
He designed it to stay together. So when I think of what I want my children to have is that relationship that resembles what God has done for us.
Yes.
And ultimately, Father Damien Daughtry, many times he would tell me, you can't love them enough. And at first I was kind of challenged by that. And I was
Right.
like, oh, what do you mean? But the more I've thought about it, compared to God, I've got a challenge in front of me.
Yes.
So it's important that I love and do for them, for my wife, as much as I possibly can, humanly possible, spiritually possible,
Yes.
and think of the other, give myself to the other.
Yes.
Because that's the crux of what Christ and God has done for us.
And it's temporal and spiritual.
Absolutely.
We have to pray for our wives.
Right.
And I think many times for men, we're busy. We worked. We have time. I thought I remembered her in a prayer. But it's the spiritual side of that partnership and that dignity
Yes.
is truly praying for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's a very beautiful thought and beautiful sentiment. Thank you for sharing
Absolutely.
that. I appreciate that. So, going back to children for a moment, when your children witness you as a father or a mom respecting, loving, and honoring their spouse's dignity, it sets not only an example, but it becomes somewhat of a formulaic outline for them. This is what it should look like. This is what love should look like. This is what a marriage should look like.
Absolutely.
And it's so vitally important when we're disagreeing as a couple,
Yes.
that in that disagreement, we never do it in a way that scandalizes or shocks our children, no matter what age they are.
Exactly. Yes. And to me, that's what's so important is how does my son, how does my daughter view a relationship after they've seen what we've done?
Right.
Because my son needs to understand whoever you're in relationship with, you have to give of yourself. If you've seen me do something different, I'm responsible for that, first
That's
of all,
right.
and I owe that to God.
Yes.
And I have to answer for that. But on the other side, too, is I want him to learn and do better than I've done.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to keep that message going and try to reflect what God has shown us
Yes.
through my wife, through our relationship.
Yes.
But you're nailing it right there. It's important.
Oh, it really is. It can be the difference for them later on in their lives when they go out into the world and they meet someone and they experience it through courtship or dating. They'll see, well, how does this person handle disagreement? How does this person handle? And they have a comparison. Now, I would love to tell you that my children's comparison would be perfect. I would love to tell you that,
Right.
but I can't tell you that. So that's the other thing too, is that when you do this thing that maybe causes a bit of a scandal for them or shock, I think it's also very important to circle back and come to the children and say, that should not have happened. Here's why.
That is a huge thing, because to be able to admit that something went wrong, be able to come back and say, this is what you witnessed or what you what happened here shouldn't happen. I mean, that gives a testament to the children that you want them to get better, you want to see better, you want them to do better.
Right.
And there is a good example of, whatever happened, that we want to correct that. We don't want you to leave and walk away thinking this is the way it is and you just accept the wrong.
That's right.
And I think that gives a lot of credibility to the relationship with your children as well.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's I think first of all, to be willing to admit to your child that you're not perfect.
Right.
Even though in their infancy, idyllically, they may see you as perfect. It doesn't take long for them to figure out that you're not.
Exactly.
So when you can admit and point out where you failed, where your flaw was, I think it even tightens the bond between you and your child. It may be a little bit shocking for them to walk away and say, even though I know he or she's not perfect, I can't believe they just told me they're not perfect. Right. But again, that's even an example that they could take forward and say, this happens in life. Sometimes you have to say, I blew it.
Right. Very good.
Yeah. So the idea of dignity with our spouse is very broad and very long because, yes, it involves the relationship that she and I has. It involves the relationship with our children. But it also transcends into extended family. You know, I don't know about you, but my wife came with in-laws, and I came with in-laws.
Right.
And they stay with you pretty much till your last breath.
That's right.
And even within that, there can be challenges. And I think sometimes in our adult life, we forget that. That, you know, my wife was one of 4 children. She spent 20-some years of those with her siblings.
Right.
And they have relationships. And those relationships, in some ways, have a bond that's not equal to, but it's
Strong.
very strong and very close to. It is inseparable.
Right.
And there are times in a sibling relationship and a family relationship where, just like spouse, they can butt heads.
Sure.
And that's always been a remarkable thing, is because that's an opportunity as a husband for you to step back and not become emotionally involved. But it's also a time to look and say, how is she?
Right.
Is this good for her?
Right.
Is she conducting herself with respect? Is she being properly respected? And it's an important thing, if you can, to be able to say, hey, I know you're having a disagreement with your brother, but in regards to that disagreement, just know that, and fill in the blank.
Right. And that's the thing, is that it is a very broad, things can happen in a lot of different
Yes.
directions. I think that it's really important to address things that way so that everybody understands, number one, that you're not the tiebreaker. There's none of that.
Right.
It's more of this hoping to smooth over whatever that is, deal with it as it comes, but realize the weight that is there.
Sure. I've come to realize over the years, I'm not here to take sides,
No.
per se.
No.
You know, I mean, obviously by attachment, you could say, well, you are taking sides. But you're not really there to take sides. You're really there to say, this is between you two. I just want to make sure that you're properly protected.
Exactly.
And you're protecting the other members of the family too, and that this doesn't spiral out of control.
And on a separate note, one of the things that I always think about is when it comes to my wife's parents, they have an influence. And if things had gone wrong really badly, I'd done some really horrible things, I would expect a father my father-in-law to step in and say something, and I would have to deal with that. So, yeah, it can take all kinds of different directions.
Yes.
But I think with the grace of God, you work through those things and you accept whatever comes your way and deal with those. It's there's no one answer for all of that.
And that's an important thing too, is that, yes, your father-in-law might come to you, and at the same time, you have to have the same amount of respect for your mother and father-in-law
Absolutely.
that you do for your own parents.
Right.
And in fact, some ways, you have a tremendous esteem, because if it weren't for them and if it weren't for their love, you would not have this person as the love of your life. Yeah.
That's right.
So it really is not a singular, the dignity of our spouse is not a singular cause. When you really start to unfold it and tear it apart, so to speak, it morphs into deeper and deeper elements where it really happens that this means that all day, every day, when I think of my spouse, I really have to be thinking of her in the absolute best terms that I can, wanting salvation, wanting the best things for her and on earth, and wanting to be there to help in every way possible to have that happen.
I think one of the things that sticks out to me too is in having dignity for my wife is also building trust, that we're both on the same path, and we want to make sure that your mission and my mission are coalesced, that we're headed in the same direction.
Yes.
So that's another thing that I remember from, I think it was Father Schmidt, Mike Schmidt, that kind of talked about those things. I really was impressed by that.
Yeah, it's having a game plan and being united is a very important thing. I referenced the young lady this morning. One of the things we said was, had you not had that conversation, you would both continue on kind of separate in your cause. And then it becomes which one of you is going to win out of a feeling of self-righteousness.
Yeah, don't do that.
And there's no dignity in that.
No.
And even if you win, what did you win?
No.
It's an empty, very, very empty.
It's short-sighted.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
An empty victory.
Yeah.
So the idea of the dignity of every woman comes with the responsibility that we have as a father to teach our sons how to care for the dignity in every woman. And that's a topic I'd like to explore more as we go further into the program. But at this moment, what I'd like to say is that moving through our topic, man to man, and obviously what we've said is that we want this to be an open discussion about the problems that many young people and all ages face in manhood. We mentioned in our last episode, the entertainment media, the cultural norms they're painted in a way that drive manhood to the lowest common denominator. And of course, that's not correct.
No.
We also know that Mike Hayworth and Mark Serafino can't fix that. But if we don't talk about it and we don't try to seek solutions, and those active solutions are really one man at a time, one person at a time. So we want to talk about topics, and our goal in the coming months is to find topics that are particularly difficult for men. So we encourage you, if you have a topic that you would like us to talk about, to send us an email at info@stjosephradio.net and spell St. Joseph Radio completely in your email address. We are going to be taking a break, and this is Man to Man. I'm Mark Serafino. This is Mike Hayworth. We'll be back shortly.
Hi, this is Matt Loggeman with St. Joseph Radio with a great gift idea. A St. Benedict bracelet, a trendy accessory for men, women, and children that not only looks good on everyone's wrist, but is actually armor for the spiritual battlefield. This unique bracelet is handmade in Europe and contains 10 medals within the braided cord in the adult size and 7 medals in the children's size. On the front of each beautiful medal is St. Benedict holding a cross in his right hand, the object of his devotion. On the back of each medal is a cross. Surrounding the back of the medal and cross are the letters VRSN MV SMQ LIVB, in Latin reference which translates, "Begone, Satan. Never tempt me with your vanities. What you offer me is evil. Drink the poison yourself." And finally, located at the top is the word Pax, which means peace. All bracelets come packaged with an informational card and the St. Benedict blessing, which your local priest can administer. This gift is for everyone you love and care about, including yourself. Available from St. Joseph Radio. Check the website at www.saintjosephradio.net.
St. Joseph Catholic Radio is proud to announce the launch of SJEN TV, the St. Joseph Evangelization Network. SJEN TV is a premier online Catholic broadcasting network providing quality Catholic programming 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have programming such as live studio interviews, St. Joe's Java speaker presentations, current Catholic issues, and the Pro-Life series. We're featuring the many talented speakers out of Orange County, California, and this Archdiocese of St. Louis, Missouri, including Professor John Gresham, Father James Mason, Karen Nokemper, Rick Hollerick, Bill Federer, and many more. To review the program list, go to sjen.tv or on Roku, SJEN TV. All this programming is free, and we are welcoming sponsorship of new programs. Find out more at sjen.tv.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Man to Man. I am Mark Serafino with my co-host, Mike Hayworth.
Hello.
So, we're talking about dignity and a man's responsibility, the duty that he has been assigned by God according to St. John Paul II. So, we want to talk a little bit about, as a father, the dignity of our daughters, because the quote is, the dignity of every woman, and the daughters in our home are women.
Absolutely.
So the responsibility comes with that too. And in their formative years, it's very important as dads that we help them be aware of the dignity that they're entitled to by their office as women, and that we support that and help them grow in that as they develop themselves spiritually, intellectually, etc. And Michael, you have 2 daughters, and
Yes.
I'm sure you've had experience.
So the things that I really rely on a lot with my wife is, some of those areas that, from a man's point of view, how a daughter needs to be to help to be formed. There's a lot of things that is important to be able to present yourself in a way, especially when you're young, to learn how to present yourself in public. The ability to conduct yourself in a way that not only gives dignity to you, but also to your family name. Mm-hmm. That's really important. So the girls have always done really well when it comes to that. There's always the question of dress, right?
Sure.
And the world is always going to challenge you on that. One of the things that I liked that Institute of Christ the King has talked about is that truth and charity.
Yes.
And there's a lot of times where that difficult conversation is met with some resistance, but also there has to be some charity there, some sweetness there that you want to infuse that truth with. And if there's something really inappropriate, of course, you have to say something. Exactly. You have to be responsible, exactly. Even though a young person may not understand why that's so important. Our daughters, they have fashion that is completely different sometimes than men. If you look at all the commercials and all the social media, there's so many things that says, do this to be that. And it's the wrong message. Absolutely. And you just try. The thing that a father has to do is look at that horizon and say, let's look at where we are now, and is that where you want to be? And do you think what you're doing right now is going to get you there?
It's a great question.
I mean, it's that approach that I think is important that maybe, I think, fathers come with, where a mother would come completely different. And I mean, and she knows also what that path is, what the outcome could be, yes. If you don't straighten this out now.
Yes.
So, but you do your part. I think that's what's really important.
I think there's an element, too, as it relates to that with the child themselves, with the daughter themselves, is their intellectual readiness.
Right.
In fashion choice. Where are they?
Right.
Are they able to handle this? Are they capable? Or will this cause them to get ahead of themselves?
Right.
And that's a difficult balance. And, Valerie and I have struggled with that with all 3 of our daughters.
Right.
Where is the proper balance? We don't want to harness them and contain them.
Right.
Really don't. But we also didn't want to just turn them loose and say,
right.
Hey, this is what the world says you should be doing, and this is how you should be dressing and acting. So have at it, go do it, and we'll meet you on the other end.
Well, and so one of the things that was a interesting change, because there's quite a difference between my oldest daughter and my youngest daughter, and one of the things I think is interesting is that they both see me differently because they experienced me at different points in my life.
Sure.
I can tell you from being in the military, I was probably a little more strict, to say the least, and had a mindset of this is how things go. I can tell you since I've retired from the military, but moved on in the industry, that my approach and having at least 2 children before, and my third daughter here, or my second daughter here, that my approach to her is different than my first, and that's what I want to let young fathers know. It's okay. You are going to change. You should change.
Yes.
There's a maturity there. I started out very young and had an idealistic thought of how I should be as a father.
Sure.
But through interaction with other families, through growing myself, and the experiences, there's a lot of things that have changed that really has gotten better, and the approach is better. But I know my oldest is like, who are you? You're not the same guy, and it's true.
Absolutely, for sure.
Right.
And it's only really a natural progression that happens as we grow, because I'll be 66 in a few weeks, I'm still growing.
Yes.
I'm still developing. I'm allowed to change.
Yes.
I'm going to change. And it's sometimes difficult for younger people, especially for our children, to identify or to relate to that.
Right.
Because this is who we knew. This is how I knew.
Right.
And even in my own home, I'm 8 years younger than my closest brother, and I have 2 older brothers. When they talk about their life growing up, I have to honestly think to myself, I wonder where I was. And so much had changed, for my
Right.
father economically, where we lived, and the state of things in the world, in their lives. So I understand when they tell their story that it is true, but I'm also thinking to myself, I didn't have any of that.
Right.
And mom and dad weren't that way.
Right.
But a decade had passed.
Right.
And even in that, within not only my parents' maybe change, the world had changed in a decade.
Yes.
So thoughts changed, ideas changed, new technologies came along, or new practices that in some cases were very good, and in other cases maybe not so good, and in the eyes of older siblings, way liberal. Now all of a sudden, mom and dad are these liberal crazy people. So that is an interesting thing as it relates to in a person's time,
Yes.
being able to, as a parent, discern where is that child. And that's a whole other thing as a parent. For fathers, we talked about that at our men's meeting recently, that in a leadership role, part of what comes with that is discernment. And we're given the grace to discern. Not everyone doesn't get it to the same degree, but what God gives us to be able to do that, we have to use and we have to apply.
Right.
And we have to trust that this is the way I feel. This is what I'm thinking in my prayer life and in my observations of you, child, that you're either ready or not ready for
Right.
this.
And one of the things that, again, my wife, that helper, can balance some of that too, because, my approach may be one thing, but then, getting that other point of view really helps.
Mm-hmm.
And so that again goes back to that dignity of my wife and how it's portrayed for my family and the children. When you have those conversations, or you've walked away from a discussion with your daughter and let me go talk to mom about this, and it may be that you've kind of thought you settled things,
Right.
but in that discussion with your wife, you're kind of like, maybe there's a couple of things else I needed to.
That's right. Maybe there's more information I
Right,
need to have.
right, and it's so good. It's so good.
Well, the idea too, as fathers with our daughters, they will grow up
Yes,
and they will go out into the world. And let me say this, as we sit here today, the divorce rate continues at a rate of 50%. Second marriages, 70%.
right,
So if we had no other job, it would be to help our daughters avoid
yes,
being a 50% statistic. And I think one of the ways we can help accomplish that, again, is how we help to form them, how we help to raise them. And I think throughout their lives, it's important to point out things that we see, things that we observe. And it may not be within our own family, but it could even be something we see in popular entertainment. But why this situation exists, why it's wrong, maybe how it could have been avoided, and why it's not romantic, why it's not the solution.
right,
Saying, well, this doesn't work, I'll just walk away from it. I'll go back again to my conversation with the young lady this morning. I mentioned the statistics, 50% divorce, 70% second. She told me that on one side of her family, every was divorced, remarried, and divorced again.
right.
Every single person on one side of her family.
Right.
So it's devastating and it's real. And if we just leave our daughters to it, they may walk into a really bad situation.
And that's what's so important, is that as we help them become young women, it's important to grow and be able to discern as well.
Yes.
She has a responsibility to discern that other person as well.
Yes.
And you want to make sure that she has a good idea of where she wants to go and how she wants to get there.
Right.
Because haphazardly approaching a relationship with another person is, I think, dangerous.
Yes.
Because of the impact of going through a divorce, going through all those things that
Yeah.
just unnecessary.
Yes.
If you start with the right steps and discern up front, have those conversations. And there's so many. That's why we have a marriage formation.
Right.
Having that couple go through and ask those questions up front gets them on the same page.
Absolutely.
And that's where we as fathers have to get that starting point, as you develop as a Catholic. Are you developing your faith? Are you developing your education? As much as you can. That doesn't mean you have to go to college. I'm just saying, just be good at life skills. Try to understand how things are going to go in the world so that you don't walk out and just be dependent. You need to be a helper just as much as he's a helper to you.
Yes.
So I think that's important, that you don't look at this ability to have a relationship, get married, and think, okay, he's going to take care of it all.
No. The other thing, too, is that when our daughters are dating, there's the old stereotype of having to go to the girl's dad. The girl's dad is depicted all the time as, this really hard-nosed guy and, don't do anything to my daughter. And, it's somewhat stereotypical. But the idea of discernment is that when our daughters are dating, as dads especially, we have to be very discerning about what we see in the way our daughter and the young man she's dating, how they interact.
Yes.
And I remember some years ago, a man that I knew talking about just prior to his daughter becoming of dating age. His idea was that if a young man wanted to date his daughter, he should come to the father and say, I would like to date your daughter. And he laid out a scenario, and he said that in the scenario he would say to the young man, why? Why do you want to date my daughter? And he said there was one answer that was an instant killer, and it was for fun.
Don't do that.
No, because my daughter wasn't created for your fun.
Right.
She's not an object.
Right. Exactly. That's the word I was looking for, is that too many times we men view women as an object.
Absolutely.
As something that we can have fun.
Yes.
It's horrible. That is not what we're here to do.
Right.
Grown people don't do that. Adults don't do that. You don't treat another person that way.
No.
That is a person that we see in the eyes of God as God. I mean, as somebody that liked the relationship of God with his creation. Right. Don't do that.
That would be kind of like saying, well, I want to do this with God for fun.
No.
And I don't know anywhere in Scripture where God did something for fun.
There's no dignity in that.
That's right. That's right. So that the purpose of a dad and his interaction with his daughter is hugely, hugely important. And it's one that can't be underestimated and has to really constantly be nurtured and worked upon, even after your child leaves the home, whether through marriage or in the single life. In the single life, daughter's going to depend on dad a lot, because in a lot of ways he's going to be that male voice of reason. And in the married life, daughter and son-in-law might depend on dad. What's your thought on this? What are your perspectives on that? And if they respect that you respect them, they will come to you with those types of questions.
Right.
And if they don't, they're going to go elsewhere.
Right. Another point is that in that formation, I think there's certain standards that we try to have for our daughters and make sure that they understand. And we want to know what they're looking for. We want to know what their interests are. Yes. But then there are certain things that should sort of be expectations. So when a gentleman is interested in my daughter, there's some things that I think she'll be looking for.
Yes.
How is she treated? Is she treated with dignity?
Yes.
Because if you are not doing that, that relationship will be very short.
Yes.
And I would expect that. And it's important that when a young lady is coming up through that formation, that she understands what those standards are for herself. Mm-hmm. There should be an expectation of how she should be treated. And, I would never want somebody to go out and do something that's puts you in a unscrupulous, is that the right word?
Scrupulous.
Where you're put into a position where things don't look good for you, your reputation is on the line. Don't do those things.
Right.
So it's important to have that standard in mind before you even start down the relationship road.
Yep.
And that's where we can help as fathers.
Exactly. And where we maybe have an even bigger responsibility is in raising our sons.
Yes.
Because going back to the very beginning, God has assigned as a duty to every man. Our sons fall under the title of man.
Yes.
And how they respect and honor the dignity of women is in many ways a reflection on us. And we're at a stage in the world where the idea of the dignity of a woman isn't even an idea. It's an afterthought, if that. So this is so vital for men in the world today to really take into consideration, especially as you're helping to raise your sons and form your sons. This is one of the keys to changing the direction that we're going with manhood and bringing it back to where it should be.
Right. Now, this is just a YouTube thing. I get that, but there's a influencer that brought up a subject where single mothers were having problems with their teenage sons, and to the point where they had to have outside individual, man, come in and talk to them. And they would challenge the son. What I found interesting is that that's not your father, but yet and still this man is required to really talk to your son and get them straightened out on how to treat the mother. Because, as a young boy, I remember mouthing off to my mom.
Oh, gosh.
Well, first of all, my mom took care of it. But then my dad was also there
Yes.
to take care of it as well. And that's why, even with a divorced home, my dad was involved in my life, which I'm very thankful for.
Very fortunate.
Very fortunate to have. And not everybody has that.
That's right.
But in that instance, when I'm looking at those type situations where it takes a man coming in to talk to a son, what I did learn is that it's important to get it now, that 13-year-old and younger now, and deal with those things than wait till they're 18, because by the age of 18, you're pretty set, and everybody else can go a different way because you have your mind set.
That's
Nobody
right.
can tell you anything.
No.
And then you have to have that significant emotional event to bring you back to reality. But and we call those C moments. But yeah, once you see, oh, that's not the way I'm supposed to act, sometimes it's too late. Sometimes that stuff is irrevocable, where you're having trouble with the law, trouble with some sort of life advance that you put a hard block in that, and you can't go that way anymore.
Right.
So I think it's really important that when we raise our sons, that we give them the tools that they need and understand that we have to hold that dignity of woman important. One of the things you talk about here in our notes is...
I have to just do a quick station break. You are listening to St. Joseph Radio Presents. This is Man to Man, coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. Now, Michael, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I just want to go back to the custody of the eyes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So guys, if there's anything that I could pass on is your ability to maintain control of what you see and what you do is important. And anytime you think that, oh, I can handle that or I can see this, we are built this. God designed us for certain things, and sometimes we take those gifts that we've been given and use them for the wrong things.
Yes.
So that's so important to understand that what you see and what you have mind to see. If you think about all the advertisements we ever saw, I always think it's funny. They're advertising tires, and you have this scantily clad woman, and I'm like, what's that got to do with tires?
Nothing.
Perfume, same thing. I'm like, what are we doing?
Yes.
I mean, but yet and still, it takes your mind off what they're trying to sell you. They're selling you something, and
Yes.
it gets your mind off of reason totally.
Correct.
You can't reason when you have that in your sight.
Well, our brains are the world's greatest computer.
Yes.
So our brains store more data than we can possibly imagine. They have incredible capacity. So to your point, over a lifetime of images, and some of them are flashed so quickly,
Yes.
but our brains retain them. And without proper custody,
Yes.
without a proper idea of, because in so many cases, the image is unavoidable. It's there before you know
Right.
it's coming. But what do I do with it now that I've had it?
Right.
It's here. It's in my brain. It may be there forever.
Right.
So what should I do with that? What can I do with that? I don't know that you or I have any one answer. That's a great theological question.
Right.
But one thought that does occur to me is that we can help ready our sons as those images come up by talking about how that really damages the dignity of women.
Right.
And, it's a simple comparison. Your mom is a woman. This person you just saw is a woman.
Right.
That duty that we have goes to both of them.
Absolutely,
So,
yes.
so maybe the best thing we can do in our simple way is to, when we see that person who's been tasked with and paid for that ad, to really try to just inwardly offer a quick prayer, just even an ejaculatory prayer for that woman and her dignity. If we couldn't do nothing else with our sons, is to help them to teach them that.
Right.
That when they see that, no matter how glorious or glamorous it may appear, it really contradicts their natural duty.
Right.
And I think as we go through life, it never feels good to know that we're contradicting what we were put here to do.
Right.
And it's a question of that contradiction. One of my sons and I, we like to go to hockey games. And it's really rather distressing when we go to the games to hear the conversations of the people around you. Now, of course, you can't control that. You're in an arena with 19,000 people. So over the years, when that's occurred, I can't tell my son to unhear that.
No.
You just simply can't. And in some cases, you say nothing at all because they may not have been paying attention. They may not have heard that. But what I find now as he's an adult is we'll be at a hockey game and he'll just look at me and say, why did they even buy a ticket to come here? I mean, they could have done that at home. They could have had that conversation. They're not even looking at the game.
Right.
And he's frankly offended.
Yeah.
I'm here to watch the game, not hear you and all of your hijinks.
Right.
So it's and I don't take credit for that. What I say is that they have that natural inclination that they recognize. Boys recognize that it's wrong.
Right.
Because it's a part of us. What we can do as fathers is to help them recognize the incidents when they're wrong.
Right.
And I mean, some are very obvious. A bikini-clad woman, probably wrong.
Right. And the other side is that the example that we provide.
Right.
There's so many times where you want to be, or you should be, the example that our sons see. And it's important also across the board when we talk about society on a greater scale.
Yes.
As we conduct ourselves on the outside, what we do is important, so that if I'm with my son and something happens, the biggest thing I've noticed a change is opening the door for a woman.
Yes.
It shouldn't be an issue.
No.
If you do have that happen to you, I mean, we're guys, number one, and you take some kind of guff for opening the door for someone, take the guff, move on. It's a comment. You did your part.
Right.
So, and then for me, it's important to walk on the right side of a woman when you're walking them someplace.
Yes.
If you're going to get this right, it helps. Open the car door, please.
Yes.
So those are the things I think about.
So men, dignity. Remember, dignity is the key, and it's part of the formula and the solution that you can apply to loving your wives and spouses and all the women in your life in the way that God calls us and assigns for us to love them. Thank you for another great episode of Man to Man. This is Mark Serafino and Michael Hayworth. We want to wish you a great, great day and a great weekend, and we're looking forward to talking to you again. Once again, if you have any questions and you have any topics that you would like Mike and I to discuss, please send us an email at info@stjosephradio.net. Spell out St. Joseph Radio completely, and we're looking forward to talking to you again next month. Have a great day.
Website, stjosephradio.net. That's SAINT, josephradio.net. Or call us 636-447-6000. It's all at your fingertips to help us evangelize the world, bringing the good news of Christ to everyone you meet and change one soul at a time. Thank you for your prayers and support. Until next time, may God bless you and your family. This has been a presentation of St. Joseph Radio Presents.